So, my hatred for communism begins with Ned Dana. But before I get into that, let's go back to Ned's freshman year. I really got to know Ned through music. Ned was a vital member of our band freshman year, playing violin and keyboard with us at Arts Fest. Before that, I really only knew Ned as this really smart and virtuosic violin player. But after that performance, Ned and I became friends and worked on writing music together along with Chris Paterno. Things went along great until the summer came and Ned went to China for a year. This is where my hatred of communism begins. China doesn't allow Facebook or many other social media, and long-distance calls and texts are really expensive. So it was really difficult to stay in touch with Ned. There are a few offhand hours where we could instant message when the time zones matched, but for the most part, we lost contact. But then, before junior year, Ned came back from China. I still remember when Ned's dad pulled up to our house to pick me up and go hang out with Chris and write some music. I got in the car, and Ned looked around to the back seat, pulled down his Oakley shades, and we picked up right back where we left off. Ned and I went on to become great friends and share a lot of musical experiences together. But Ned isn't just an awesome musician. He's a mathematical genius, and in fact, just a genius in general. But over the years, Ned has proven himself to be a hard worker, a dedicated scholar, and a caring friend. Ned has brilliant insight on pretty much whatever he thinks about, so I have no doubt that the speech is going to be very quality. Please stand to greet my friend, Ned Dana.
Now you know how many letters are in my password. Okay. Thank you, Kyle. Please be seated. Today I would like to share with you a story I wrote about my experience teaching in China last summer. The experience taught me about the importance of people having faith in each other. On a high-speed train ride from Shanghai to Henan province, one of the most impoverished provinces in the country, the urban city landscape transformed itself within seconds into endless cornfields with diligent workers harvesting them. I watched this recurring picture for a few hours until we finally arrived at the old rustic train station. I had seen the countryside of China on earlier train trips, but this was going to be the first time I would actually stay in a village. I did not know what to expect, but images from TV news showed the villagers' lives were more about survival than the material comforts we in the city took for granted. Explaining their situation to myself, I assumed the rural people were less intelligent or less competent and unable to take on better-paying jobs in the city. But how could I say that without knowing these people and their circumstances? I was stereotyping them as laborers and could only picture them in that role. I was about to find out how wrong I was. It was nighttime, but the sky was illuminated from the dozens of old neon signs pulsating around the train station. Crowds and cars were navigating through the square, and even though it was just normal activity, it looked almost like a political riot. As I hurriedly walked out in search of our guide, a man saw me and pulled at my arm, and with annoyance, I brushed him off, dismissing him as someone trying to sell me something. The leader of my party then spotted that man and hugged him, after which I felt extremely embarrassed. I followed them awkwardly to the police car escort that awaited us. While I had thought such an escort would only attract more attention to us foreigners, we had already been stared at multiple times as we walked towards the car. The tinted windows were a perfect barrier, giving us full view to this strange world while remaining completely unnoticed. I had come to the area with a volunteer group to teach English to the children in a remote village. The next morning, we set out for our first school. While at first we drove on deserted private highways, the terrain soon changed to muddy, makeshift roads. We passed trash heaps and broken down bridges, and I was already imagining what the school might be like. Would it be single classrooms for hundreds of kids? Would they be able to speak any English at all? I had read that this area was known for having a high rate of HIV infection. Would they look sick or different somehow? Would they hate me because I was more fortunate than they? Or would they be in awe? After driving through several miles of worn-down shelters, I had little hope for the school. Shortly thereafter, we arrived at a stone wall, displaying incomprehensible traditional Chinese writing, with a more modern, simplified character sign draped next to it to help us understand the meaning of welcome. To our great appreciation, the reception committee was overwhelmingly friendly and gracious. The neatly dressed children, all wearing bright red scarves, were lined up perfectly on opposite sides of the road, posing to form an entrance for our convoy. As we disembarked, they said, "Welcome to our school," in perfect unison and bowed. A voice from behind the wall called out a command in Chinese, causing the students to quickly disperse, running and giggling excitedly as they headed for the classrooms. Flattered and a little embarrassed by our special reception, I proceeded into the complex, hearing a loud commotion from one of the open rooms. Parents were standing outside the broken windows in order to capture a view of us, and I took a few minutes to drink some water and collect my thoughts. I was nervous that I would somehow not be good enough for this audience of almost 50 people. Nevertheless, I walked in. Immediately, the childish yelling fell to curious whispers. All eyes faced me, the first foreigner they had ever seen in their lives. I looked around the room. Several girls were standing up attentively, as there were not enough seats for all 50 children. The desks were old and worn, some with broken tops. Not expecting much, I began the lesson I had planned about colors, numbers, and basic conversation. To my pleasant surprise, the kids in the front row raised their hands immediately and called out, "Hello, how are you? Fine, thank you." They could count to 100 and knew all the colors. I almost laughed. They already knew more English than the migrant children I had taught in the Shanghai Community Center I needed to revise my lesson. Throughout the class period, the children eagerly answered my questions and enthusiastically participated in my activities. They never once lost attention, and even the shy students never gave up once engaged in a conversation. All of these students were just as capable as anybody I had ever taught. I thought to myself how unfortunate it was that these rural kids were most likely, despite their intense desire to learn, going to become the field workers I had seen on the train ride. But this was not their fault in any way. It was just what they knew best how to do. They had plenty of ability, but they were ignorant of this ability and of the opportunities which could be available from the village, away from the village. They probably didn't realize that their English level was enough to be useful in other parts of China where English speakers lived. I was struck by their innocent yet driven desire to learn. It told me about the unused potential in China. It's all about opportunity, and usually it is simply not offered to those in the countryside. But if this opportunity were available, the possible outcomes for a potential labor force of 1 billion people would be remarkable. I would hope that the Chinese government would avoid the mistake I had made of assuming stereotype roles for its people. Governments should recognize the potential in all of their people and provide opportunity for them to benefit from their capabilities. Because these rural kids grow up in an environment where diligence and dutiful work farming in the fields are emphasized for survival over anything else, they are completely accustomed to working long hours for little benefit. With more opportunity and choice, these disciplined students could develop and apply their talents and work ethic to many jobs, such as farming, teaching, business, engineering, and so on. The positive effect on the nation, and this is not necessarily just for China, could be extraordinary. We as a community should reach out and be a part of the process of unlocking people's capabilities, as teachers either home or abroad. Hopefully, we can use the strength of conveying information to others in order to improve their lives and allow them to realize their ability to contribute to society. So many lives throughout the world could be changed if children were provided a learning environment that allowed them to both realize and maximize their own potential. Everybody has a special skill, and I consider enabling each person to discover his or own respective talent a cause worth fighting for. Thank you.